Nathan had always loved visiting antique sales in search of unique items for his collection. Antiquities were his passion, and each new artifact added a fragment of history to his modest abode. On a rainy Saturday, he stumbled upon a small shop in the basement of an old house where a sale of ancient and rare artifacts was taking place. The dark sky and heavy raindrops beating against the glass created an atmosphere of mystery and comfort. The shop looked old and abandoned, as if no one had entered it for years. Descending the creaky stairs into the basement, Nathan immediately felt the cold, damp air filled with the scent of mold and old paper. Inside, the shop was dark and cramped, illuminated only by the dim light of antique lamps. Shelves laden with dusty books and strange figurines stood in the corners of the hall, many of which were disfigured by time. Nathan loved such places, where each item seemed to be a repository of many secrets. Passing by the bookshelves and rare artifacts, his attention was drawn to a small stone amulet lying on a velvet cushion in the display case. The amulet was covered with strange, engraved symbols that seemed almost alive in the dim light. When Nathan picked it up, he felt a cold shiver run down his spine, as if the artifact emitted some sinister presence. The shopkeeper, an old man with a mysterious look, stood at the counter and watched Nathan closely. His eyes gleamed in the semi-darkness, giving him a sinister appearance. Nathan approached him, holding the amulet in his hands, and noticed that the old man was shifting nervously from foot to foot. "This amulet seems to have some history," Nathan began. The shopkeeper leaned forward slightly, and his face was illuminated by the faint light of the lamp, casting eerie shadows on the walls. "This artifact has a heavy history. It belonged to an ancient cult that practiced black magic and sacrifices. Its previous owners met terrible ends. I must warn you, this item carries something sinister," the shopkeeper replied quietly. Nathan laughed, thinking the old man's words were just a marketing ploy. "I'm always ready for new stories." "How much do you want for it?" he said, taking out his wallet. The old man shook his head and, sighing, continued, "You don't understand. This amulet brings a curse. It attracts dark forces and can ruin you." Ignoring the warnings, Nathan purchased the amulet, hoping to add something unusual to his collection. As Nathan left the shop, the rain intensified. He pulled up his hood and hurried to his car, feeling the cold drops seeping through his clothes. On the way home, he glanced in the rearview mirror at a red light and froze. In the darkness of the car interior, he saw a shadow sitting in the back seat. The shadow was blurry, but its distorted features were clearly visible in the dim light of the street lamp. For a moment, Nathan felt his heart constrict with fear. But when he turned to look at the back seat, there was no one there. With his heart pounding, he could barely concentrate on the road. When Nathan returned home, he placed the amulet on a shelf in his bedroom among other antique items and tried to forget about the strange vision. However, thoughts of the shadow haunted him. He tossed and turned in bed for a long time, trying to sleep, but the feeling of unease would not leave him. Soon he realized that he had not just bought an antique artifact, but something much more ominous and dangerous than he could have imagined. On the first evening, nothing unusual happened, but the next day strange things began to occur. At night, Nathan started hearing rustles, as if someone or something was moving in the darkness of his house. At first, he attributed it to the usual noises of the old building or the wind blowing outside. However, with each passing evening, the rustles became more distinct, as if someone was deliberately scraping against the walls and floor. The next night, Nathan woke up with the feeling that someone was watching him in the darkness. He turned on the light, but found no one. At that moment, he noticed that the shadows in his room seemed strangely animated, as if moving on their own. Shadows cast by furniture and objects seemed to dance and writhe in the wrong light of the lamp. Nathan tried to explain this as tiredness and overwork. On the third day, events took a sinister turn. Nathan began seeing strange figures at the corner of his vision. They always vanished when he tried to focus on them. One morning, while washing up in the bathroom, he noticed a shadow behind him in the mirror. In an instant, the figure disappeared, leaving behind a feeling of coldness and unease. With each passing day, the sense of anxiety and fear intensified. Nathan began to fear the darkness, leaving lights on throughout the house. He noticed that the amulet, standing on the shelf in the bedroom, seemed to be the source of this unease. At night, he woke up several times, feeling heavy breathing next to him. On one such night, turning his head, he saw the amulet glowing with a menacing red light, casting bizarre shadows across the room. Evenings and nights became increasingly horrifying. In the mornings, Nathan found strange bruises and scratches on his body, as if someone had attacked him in his sleep. He began sleeping less, fearing that the shadows and strange figures would return. One night, he woke up from unbearable pain in his arm. When he looked at it, he saw burned symbols on his skin, similar to those engraved on the amulet. Shocked and frightened, he realized it was not just a coincidence. One evening, when Nathan was returning home late, he noticed strange behavior among the animals. Dogs on the street began howling and barking as he passed by. Cats hissed and ran away. Even the birds perched on wires reacted strangely to his presence, as if something was disturbing them. That same evening, upon entering the house, Nathan felt a strong chill, as if the temperature in the room had suddenly dropped. He approached the amulet and felt the hair on his body stand on end as he touched the sinister artifact. Suddenly, the lamps began to flicker and then went out completely, leaving Nathan in pitch darkness. In this silence, he heard whispers emanating from different corners of the room. The voices whispered in an unfamiliar language, and their sinister tones sent shivers down his spine. Each night, events became more terrifying. One night, waking up from a feeling of suffocation, Nathan opened his eyes and saw invisible hands gripping his throat. He couldn't breathe and tried to scream, but no sound came out. At that moment, the amulet again glowed with a red light, and Nathan felt the invisible hands loosen, allowing him to breathe. He lay on the bed, gasping for air, feeling his heart pound in his chest. Nathan began losing weight and looked increasingly haggard. His colleagues at work started noticing the changes and asked if everything was okay with him. He tried to smile and assure them that he just wasn't getting enough sleep, but the worry and fear were written all over his face. Every night, he had nightmares in which he was chased by a shadow with distorted facial features. These dreams became increasingly realistic, and Nathan could no longer distinguish between a dream and reality. In one such nightmare, he found himself in an ancient temple where sacrificial rituals were being performed around him. He saw people chained up, their cries echoing off the walls. Figures in dark robes surrounded him, their faces hidden by hoods. Nathan felt their piercing gaze directed straight at him. Suddenly, one of the figures raised its hand, and Nathan felt unbearable pain, as if his body was burning from the inside. Waking up in a cold sweat, he saw that the amulet was glowing again, and new burns appeared on his body, seared to the bone. Days and nights merged into one continuous torment. Nathan began hearing voices even during the day. They whispered horrible things to him, making him think he was going mad. The voices grew louder and clearer, especially at night. Soon, they became unbearable, turning his life into an endless nightmare. Nathan stopped leaving the house, fearing that the voices would follow him outside. Electronic devices in the house began malfunctioning. The television turned on by itself and showed frightening scenes from horror movies. One night, when Nathan tried to sleep on the sofa in the living room, the television turned on and showed an image of his bedroom, where he saw himself sleeping, with the same shadow with distorted facial features standing next to him. His mobile phone called unknown numbers, and on the other end of the line, there were only screams or eerie whispers. The computer displayed strange symbols and images, as if someone had hacked into his system and was now transmitting their messages. The animals on the street continued to behave strangely. Every time Nathan did leave the house to at least take out the trash, the dogs would start howling and barking, while the cats hissed and ran away. Birds circled above the house as if something was troubling them. One day, Nathan noticed crows gathering on a tree in front of his window, their eyes glowing with a menacing gleam. At night, Nathan saw ghosts wandering through his house. They appeared and disappeared, leaving behind a feeling of coldness and fear. One of these ghosts, a child's ghost, once approached him and begged him to return the amulet. Its voice was filled with pain and suffering. Nathan felt his heart breaking with horror and despair. Nathan began to lose his memory. He forgot important things, was confused in his memories, and couldn't even remember what he had done the day before. One day, he woke up in what he thought was an unfamiliar place, with no memory of how he got there. In panic, he ran around his house, not recognizing his surroundings, until he found his way back to his bed, where he was greeted by the amulet. glowing dimly with a red light. Every day, Nathan felt the evil emanating from the amulet growing stronger. He realized that he had brought something sinister into his home and decided to learn more about the amulet. Having started searching for information on the internet and in ancient books, visiting libraries, and consulting with experts, he learned that the amulet did indeed, as the shopkeeper had claimed, belong to an ancient cult practicing black magic and summoning evil spirits. The deeper he delved into his research, the more horrifying details emerged. It turned out that this amulet had been used in a ritual to summon a demon, which demanded sacrifices and spread its curse to anyone who dared to touch it. While Nathan conducted his research, events in his home became unbearable. Doors slammed shut on their own, furniture moved around, and invisible hands choked him at night. One night, Nathan woke up to sounds resembling whispers coming from the amulet. He approached it and heard clear words in an unfamiliar language, sounding ominous and frightening. In the mirror, he saw a ghostly figure with distorted facial features standing behind him. The figure slowly approached him until he felt its icy breath on his neck. Nathan realized that time was running out. Every night, the nightmares became more realistic and terrifying, and during the day he felt the presence of darkness that couldn't be ignored. His body was covered in new wounds, and his mind was clouded with fear. The feeling that the house was filling with sinister energy became unbearable. His research led him to an ancient ritual capable of sealing the evil spirit back into the amulet. However, this ritual required the blood of the amulet's owner. Understanding that this was his only chance, Nathan decided to perform the ritual. Preparing for the ritual took several days. Nathan carefully studied ancient texts, checking every detail and every word of the spell so as not to miss anything. At midnight, he cleared the room, removing everything unnecessary, and drew a circle on the floor using chalk, salt, and charcoal. In the center of the circle, he placed the amulet, which now seemed even more ominous, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Moonlight streamed through the windows, adding to the scene's mystery and horror. Nathan stood inside the circle, holding an ancient knife he had found in one of the antique shops many years ago. His hands were shaking, but he knew there was no turning back. Reading the words of the spell to himself, he took the knife and made a deep cut on his palm, letting the blood drip onto the amulet. The warm blood stained the stone, and Nathan felt the air in the room grow heavy and dense. As he began to recite the ancient incantations, the house filled with wild screams and the howling of the wind. It seemed like the walls were trembling and the shelves were about to collapse from the power of the sounds. Invisible forces seemed to resist his actions, trying to interfere with the completion of the ritual. But Nathan, gritting his teeth, continued to chant the incantations, his voice overpowering the screams and growing louder and more confident. Suddenly, the amulet shone brightly, blinding Nathan. He closed his eyes, feeling the energy swirling through his body. The light grew brighter, filling the room and driving out the darkness. Then, in an instant, everything fell silent. The light dimmed, as if the amulet had absorbed all the evil energy. Nathan felt his strength leaving him, and he lost consciousness. When he woke up in the morning, Nathan discovered that the house had returned to normal. The feeling of a sinister presence had disappeared, and the amulet no longer emitted evil energy. Everything seemed as it was before the artifact appeared. Nathan, feeling incredible relief, decided to bury the amulet far outside the city, hoping that no one else would fall victim to its curse. He found a secluded spot in the dense forest where people rarely ventured. There, he dug a deep hole and buried the amulet, uttering a few final words of farewell. As the pit was filled, Nathan felt the burden lifted from his shoulders at last. Despite the nightmares having stopped, Nathan never felt the same again. He moved to a different apartment, hoping to start a new life. But sometimes at night he felt like he heard whispers and saw strange shadows. In those moments, fear gripped him that the evil he had unleashed might return. Nathan wasn't sure if he had completely rid himself of the evil, but he knew one thing: he would never again toy with what he didn't understand. The experience with the amulet had forever changed him, leaving a deep mark on his soul. Now he was more cautious when choosing antiques, always remembering the day when his hobby turned into a terrible nightmare.